want Detroit sports talk done right? Yeah! If you want it, you got it. It's Detroit sports talk with attitude. It's the Knee Jerks with Eno and Big Al.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like at this time to introduce to you one of the finest running backs in the United States of America, and our number one pick, Barry Sanders.
Here's Isaiah. Let's see what we got. All the way up.
We might not be in your car or on your transistor radio, but we're bringing you the best of Detroit sports past, present, and future. It's time for the Knee Jerks with two guys who know Detroit sports. Here's Greg Eno and Al Beaton.
Well, I won't get a chance to say this ever again in my lifetime, but it's 2/22/22. All twos means it's time for the Knee Jerks, Detroit sports talk of Eno and Big Al. I'm the Big Al of the equation, longtime Detroit-based podcaster and blogger. Joining me, as always, is the man, well, I don't know how he feels about the number 2, but he's got the cutest dog around, and that would be Greg Eno of the Out of Bounds blog and numerous other projects. Greg, what's up?
Hey, Al, good to see you again. Yeah, 222, and you're gonna hear more of 222 in a little bit. I'll tell you that, and when we get into the birthday game. But yes, I am here. I am Greg Eno from my WordPress Out of Bounds blog. You can catch me there pretty much every Monday. Follow me on Twitter at Greg Eno, and follow the Knee Jerks, of course, on Twitter at the Knee Jerks. And we are going to be joined a little bit later on, in a few more minutes, by our good friend and new friend of the show,
yes,
Siddy Hall, our NBA stat guy and guru, who is so learned on the NBA, and he's going to talk to us today about, even though it's we're a little bit late to the party, the Marvin Bagley III trade, and he's going to break that down for us. He's going to talk about why the Pistons didn't trade Jerami Grant and a couple other things Pistons related that have developed since we spoke to him last in late January, so looking forward to that. And we've got, of course, Juwan Howard we're going to be talking about, Matt Stafford, Mlb Lockout, and all sorts of things. Before we get to any of it, though, we're going to play a game that we like to call Whose Birthday Is It, Maestro?
We baked you a birthday cake. If you get a tummy ache and you moan and groan and woe, don't forget we told you so. Happy birthday! Happy birthday!
Everybody knows how we play this game by now, but I'm going to tell you about it anyway. This is a game where I give Al a clue or two or three of an individual whose birthday it is today in the world of sports. And if Al can correctly guess that person within the first two clues, he will win a box set of Room 222.
Oh, yes. I remember Karen Valentine was one of the teachers on that show.
Yes.
Yeah, God, when that show was on, good Lord. I remember watching that on Friday nights as a wee lad. Yep. Yes, it was.
Absolutely. Room 222.
It's a sort of show you'll never, I remember it was a sitcom, but it wasn't exactly funny, if you know what I'm saying. It was more funnier situations, or you know what I mean? Yeah, it wasn't laugh out loud fun. It wasn't like it wasn't like a Brady Bunch or anything like that either. It was just it was more sophisticated. It was aimed at a little more older audience. But yeah, it's the kind of show I don't think you'd see today. So, but Room 2, I haven't thought of that show in years.
Yeah. So, hey, I had to do it on a day like today.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Room 222. This person, of course, was also born on 222. In 1918, he made his name in the world of hockey. 1918 is when he was born. He's no longer with us. He died in 2000, actually. He is a Hall of Famer. He is big time associated with the Red Wings. I will say that. This is kind of a tricky one to give you clues for without giving it away. Big time associated with the Red Wings in the Hall of Fame. I mean, he was associated with the Red Wings almost in his entire hockey life, with some exceptions when he worked for other teams, but is widely considered a Red Wing. I'm going to just have to stop right there because I don't want to give too many other.
And when did you say he passed away?
He passed away in 2000.
2000. Okay. Oh. Huh.
Born in 1918.
Born in 1918, which means he probably. Oh shoot! So Abby's played. Okay, trying to think.
Big time Red Wing.
Our big time Red Wing from the old days.
In all phases, player.
Yeah.
After a player.
I'll try Sid Abel.
You got Siddy Hall. Yeah, Siddy Hall.
Yeah, that's what gave it away when you said all phases, which meant front office and broadcasting and all that.
Yeah, he did it all. Sid did it all. He was the player. He was a coach. He was the captain. He was a broadcaster. He was a GM. He did it all for the Red Wings and passed away 22 years ago and some change. And, of course, a Hall of Famer and played a little bit with the Blackhawks, but obviously overwhelmingly with the Red Wings. And coached a little bit with St. Louis, coached a little bit with the Scouts. But he was, of course, a longtime broadcaster with Bruce Martin. So, yeah, Sid is would have been 104 today. Wow, unbelievable. But, yeah, so good stuff. You get the box set of Room 222 on 222. So good job.
Well, thank you very much. I don't know what else to say other than let's get to the topic. So, Greg, why don't you go ahead and introduce once again our favorite NBA stat guru, the stat guy.
Yeah, Siddy Hall started joining us on the Knee Jerks last fall when we brought him in to preview the Pistons season. We promised he and the audience that we would bring him back around mid-season, and we did in late January. And then we said to him, well, we'll bring you back whenever there's news about the Pistons. And he said, well, there's the trade deadline coming up. We said, well, let's keep an eye out on it. They indeed, Pistons did make a trade. Marvin Bagley III, they gave up a couple of second-round picks, which Siddy doesn't like. We'll talk about that. They also gave up Josh Jackson and Trey Lyles. They did not trade Jerami Grant, who was the player that kept getting bandied about in all sorts of rumors leading up to the trade deadline, despite the fact that he had been injured. So here we are. We say, hey, look, come on back. Can you come on back and talk about this? He said, sure. So let's, in a pre-recorded interview, let's roll that right now. It's so soon that we're having our good friend and NBA and Pistons guru Siddy Hall with us, the stat guy, but circumstances dictate that because just before or just after we recorded our last show on February the 8th, the NBA trade deadline, of course, came, and Pistons didn't trade Jerami Grant, but they did trade Josh Jackson and Trey Lyles, and they got Marvin Bagley III. So we decided we'd bring Siddy back, even though he was just with us in late January, to talk about this because this is a little intriguing, and I know he's got some thoughts on it. So we're gonna do that now. Siddy, thanks for being here on another Tuesday night with us.
Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Al. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Let's get right into it. First of all, it was kind of a complicated trade because it involves so many teams. We'll just concentrate on the Pistons aspect of it. Like I said, they got Marvin Bagley III, a big man, which of course is, as you know, as you've said, the Pistons have been very thin in the big man department, but they did give up Josh Jackson, like I said, Trey Lyles, and 2 future second-round picks for a guy, Bagley, who will be a restricted free agent at the end of the season. So, Siddy, some of the fans were a little bit confused that the Pistons did that, given the fact that they could have just held their cards, so to speak, and went after Bagley in free agency. They chose not to do that. So can you kind of explain to the listeners why maybe why they did what they did and what your thoughts were about what they did?
Yeah, well, what they did was they tried to ensure that they had the inside track on Marvin Bagley III, and they paid a premium to acquire that guarantee. It was a very expensive premium to pay, in my opinion. What fascinates me about the trade, first of all, one of the trends is teams going after guys who are entering restricted free agency for the purpose of being able to match offers and keep that guy. Mm-hmm. They'll pay a premium. Yeah. That's what they did last year with Hamidou Diallo, and that ended up working. Right. They signed Diallo for 2 years. They're going to have to figure out what to do with him again in 2024, I guess it would be, or 2023 at the end of next year. Right. But that was a good deal. It worked. They got the inside track on a guy they liked, and they signed him to a reasonable contract, and it made the Pistons a better team. With Bagley, we're paying more than 1 second-round draft pick. We're paying 2 second-round draft picks and a guy named Trey Lyles, who was playing the best basketball of his career.
Yep.
Lyles was making $2.5 million, barely above minimum wage. Right. He had an additional year left. And if you want to put those two guys side by side, you could argue especially based on the money being paid out to them, that Lyles has more value than Bagley. Now, Bagley still has the P word attached to him, the potential.
Mm-hmm. Right.
He's still being viewed that way. Obviously, Troy Weaver feels that way about him. But as far as the cost, when you look at those 2 seconds, Troy is, continuing a trend that began in Detroit with Jeff Bauer and Stan Van Gundy and Ed Stefanski, which is these guys are like Santa Claus with the second rounders, spreading cheer to their counterparts. And now look at what happened though. So let's analyze this. So Bagley is part of the 2018 draft class. He's one of a number of guys that are still unsigned by their teams that drafted them. And another guy in that group was also involved in that trade, and that's Vince DiVincenzo from Milwaukee. Got traded to Sacramento. He cost 2 second rounders. So Detroit paid 2 players, including one on a great contract, and 2 second rounders for a guy, Marvin Bagley, who has a lot of question marks. Sacramento turned around and flipped the 2 seconds for a guy who's proven, who's in the same situation, a guy who's a restricted free agent. It was clear that Milwaukee was not going to re-sign him. You cannot keep all of your players. Milwaukee's already paying like $50 million in luxury taxes. And if they had signed DiVincenzo, that tax might have gone up to like 90 or 80. I don't know the exact numbers, the math, but it would have ballooned. So they had to let him go. That's just how the NBA works these days. They're already paying a lot of guys big money. Bagley doesn't fall into that category. Sacramento sent out the vibe before the season started that he was not part of their future. So, Troy Weaver had to decide, if he had ice in his veins, he might have just played his cards and say, I'm going to wait and bet that no one else will make that kind of deal to obtain his rights, and also bet that we can sign him in the offseason. What are the odds of that happening? I don't know, 50-50. But,
let's talk about Bagley, the player, though. This aside, I know everything you just said, of course, is very important, certainly, because it will determine whether or not this was a good trade or not. But for the time being, he is a Piston. So what does Bagley, give this team in your estimation? What are the upsides to him?
Well, if you're just talking about, I have to think. It's hard for me to talk about him without talking about contracts. Mm-hmm. Every player, it's always, you got to think, do they outperform their contract? And there is one caveat to getting Bagley, a guy who's been underperforming, entering a contract year. It's conceivable that Detroit could sign him to a not too expensive deal. I don't know. No one really knows what his value is. $10 million a year? I don't know. Mm-hmm. And then he could suddenly blossom and be like a Jerami Grant impact type of performer and outperform his contract. If that happens, then, hats off to Troy Weaver. Mm-hmm. That would be awesome. Now, will that happen? I'm a little bit skeptical. I'm not a huge Bagley fan. When I start analyzing his game, I start by thinking what he doesn't do, what he's not. Not a great outside.
What isn't he? Tell us what he isn't. Tell us what he isn't.
Not really a shot blocker for a guy his size. Doesn't really play. He doesn't play physically. His energy level's not super high. His motor. Not an outside shooter. Doesn't play bully ball. A finesse guy. Mm-hmm. Doesn't see the floor. Doesn't see his 3-point shooters on the perimeter. In his 2 games, we're in the honeymoon, so like anytime he grabs a rebound, everyone's getting excited. all right, way to go, Marvin, which, he's tall and long. He can do that,
Right,
But, if you look, he played 2 games, 44 minutes, 0 blocks, 0 steals, one assist. Mm-hmm. That's kind of, consistent with his track record. So I'm a little bit skeptical, but as long as he's not signed to a mega deal, which is not going to happen, it shouldn't be. It's a risk, but it may be a calculated risk. Well,
we're talking with our NBA and Piston guru, the stat guy Siddy Hall here on the Knee Jerks. I'm Greg, from my WordPress Out of Bounds blog, and we'll bring Big Al in here in a second. But I want to look at this again from you mentioned the P word at the top of the discussion. He's 4 years out. Bagley is from being a top draft choice, a top pick, and he's been hurt a lot. He's missed a lot of games as well. Is this a guy though? That I know you said you're skeptical, but is he a guy, though, that you still feel could be gotten more out of under a Dwayne Casey regime that maybe other coaches weren't able to get out of this kid?
That's a great point. I agree with you. Dwayne Casey is going to be huge in his development. Dwayne Casey has a track record of he seems to make guys comfortable. So, yeah, that could happen. Dwayne Casey is part of the equation for sure. And that does lend more optimism that he can get Marvin Bagley, pointed the right way and get his game, where it should be. When you watch him again, it's like you ask yourself, what is he exactly? He's tall and, he's fluid when he runs. He seems like a decent athlete. That's why he went number 2. But what is he? In NBA terms, basketball terms, what is he? I see a guy who, likes to post up and ends up shooting the ball. He'll get the ball 6 feet from the basket and shoot from 8. A guy who doesn't see teammates. He doesn't dominate around the rim like you would hope. Can that change? It could change. In a sense, he is a little bit like a Daniel Ayton with Phoenix. Phoenix, he was the number 1 pick overall, a very fluid, kind of a pretty player, more than a banger. And sometimes that can be frustrating to watch. But Ayton, in year 3 and at the end of year 3 and this year 4, he just picked it up and is like basically, almost an all-star. Bagley has not come close to that.
Here's an interesting tidbit. Marvin Bagley III was the number 2 overall pick by the Kings in 2018. He's got a Detroit Pistons connection because his grandfather is Joe Caldwell, who was also the number 2 overall pick in 1964 by the Pistons. I did not know this. Joe Caldwell, who played in the NBA for a million years, is the grandfather of Marvin Bagley III. Did you know that?
I did not until I watched the Piston broadcast. I think Greg Kelser and the staff informed us. Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah,
Jumping Joe.
Joe's 80 years old. Yeah.
Jumping Joe had a different physique than Marvin.
Oh, much for sure. Joe Caldwell was 6'5". He was a small forward, shooting guard kind of a guy. But anyway, I thought I'd throw that in there. Let's bring Big Al into the discussion. What you got for Siddy?
Yeah, I guess when it comes to Bagley, I think it says volumes about what Sacramento thought about him when they ran their offense, especially this year. They pretty much just stuck him in the corner, and he took 3-pointers, which says volumes about what they thought he could do offensively. He did not play in the post at all this year, and I guess that's the concern, is that this is a guy who. In the era of when your 5s can at least stretch the floor and shoot 3s, Bagley seems to shoot 3s and not very well at that, and then doesn't play in the post. So I guess that is the concern. I kind of agree with you there, because they had a nice small ball 5 in Trey Lyles, as you said, was playing great basketball for the Pistons and kind of revitalized his career. So I guess the one advantage is now the Pistons have 3 months to figure out if this guy's worth keeping.
Yeah, well, they're going to keep him for sure. Why.
Well, he's a restricted free agent, correct? Which means
he's restricted, and so the Pistons have the right of first refusal.
Right.
And what's kind of cool, and basically Bagley's got 3 options. He's going to get a qualifying offer of $7.2 million.
That's right. He's not going to get the starter what they call
That's
the
right.
starter contract. Yeah.
Yeah, the starter criteria. He did not qualify.
Yeah.
And before the season, Sacramento announced that he was not going to be part of the rotation. He was getting DNPs.
Yeah.
And his agent was furious. His agent was publicly castigating the organization because he understood it. It turned, it meant money. It meant the qualifying offer was going to be cut in half. When I saw Bagley play those 2 games with Detroit, what was happening sometimes, he and Beef Stew would be on the floor together, and both of them were like clogging up the paint.
Yeah.
Nobody could drive to the basket. So he was trying to revert to his low post game, and he just, for some reason, if you're a big man in the NBA, you have to shoot a high percentage. That's it. If you compare him to Bagley to Jarrett Allen, Jarrett Allen's only 1 year older, and Jarrett Allen shoots 68% from the field, just dunking, 15 points a game, blocking 2 shots a game, and 2 assists a game. And then you look at Bagley, a guy who averages, half a block, 0.8 blocks, less than 1 assist. Shooting percentage 53 on his 2s. I mean, that's NBA average.
Right.
That's not going to get it done.
Right.
So, okay, what else can he do? Well, you better dominate the defensive end around the rim. I mean, he's not doing it. So something's got to change in his game. There's got to be improvement somewhere.
Was this what about the guys they let go? Jackson and Lyles. Were you surprised that, I thought Lyles might have been in the plans. He's only 26 years old. I thought Jackson might have been in the plans as well. Were you a little surprised? What were you more surprised about? That they got Bagley or that they gave up on Jackson and Lyles?
I was surprised about the draft picks. That was, they didn't need to add the sweeteners. That was my opinion. Okay. Jackson, it didn't surprise me at all because they have redundancy with him and Diallo. Yeah. Diallo's the better player. Diallo is under contract for another year. Jackson's going to be a unrestricted free agent at the end of the year. Then in the case of Lyles, they had to make the contracts match.
Right.
So they had to throw in someone. I was a little bit sad that it was Lyles. Again, guys who outperform their contracts are more valuable than their on-court performance. Mm-hmm. And the opposite is true, too, as we know with Blake Griffin. When you get a guy who fails to perform up to his contract, their value is less than their performance on the court. So Trey Lyles was worth more than his production. And, boy, this year he was their unsung hero. There were many a game where the starting 5 would get into trouble. Lyles would come in at the 6 or 8 minute mark and add lubrication to the offense. Mm-hmm. He had a nice season going on.
Yeah,
so,
for sure. Absolutely. Okay, a player they didn't trade, Jerami Grant. He was the one that was kind of all the talk was about him. I mean, for weeks leading up to the trade deadline. Despite the fact that he was injured for most of the time that he was being talked about, he did not get moved. Al and I talked about this a couple weeks ago. We were both under the mindset we felt that we weren't strong about trading him, but we were kind of leaning toward let's trade him because maybe he's not in the mix for the rebuild. They kept him. Your thoughts about that?
Well, in trade dynamics, Troy Weaver, when he likes someone, he'll always pay the sweetener. He'll pay extra. He'll pay premiums to get guys that he wants. In this situation, he was more the guy waiting for phone calls and waiting for offers. Mm-hmm. So apparently nobody made an offer he couldn't refuse. The other thing that's going on is that, Grant missed 25 games, and when he came back, he looked awful. Mm-hmm. So teams want assurance that they're getting a guy who, you're influenced by what's in front of you. Mm-hmm. And when Jerami Grant, he's played, I think, 9 games now. He's finally starting to come back into form, but he was not playing well at all when he first came back. So teams saw that. Probably might have put a little damper on their enthusiasm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the final thing, too, just to look around the league. The other aspect, too, I mean, undoubtedly, Weaver and the lawyers, they're talking to his agent. They're talking to Jerami. They're already discussing his future, what kind of contract he's expecting when this one expires the year after next. So, if they sort of are on the same page in that respect, there's less urgency to trade him. So I kind of take it as a sign that, they're thinking longer term together. That's a good sign, I think. Finally, if you look around the league, the way I analyze it, there were 3 players of similar talent and value to Grant who were moved. One was Karis Levert, going from Indiana to Cleveland. Indiana received very little for him. With Levert, just like Grant, had 1 year remaining, on a year and a half remaining on his deal. C.J. McCollum went to New Orleans, and New Orleans got a pretty good player in Josh Hart and a first-round draft pick and 2 seconds. That was a nice heist. And apparently Detroit did not get that offer. And similarly, Boston received Derek White from San Antonio. Boston's GM is their former coach, Brad Stevens. He paid a premium. He wanted Derek White really bad. He paid a lot. And so that was it. There were just 3 guys like Jerami Grant who moved. And, I don't know. There's a limited market there, I think, on what teams will pay and, what they just didn't get the value they needed.
Right. Al, you got anything else for Siddy?
Yeah, other than, I guess there's one quote I found interesting from Jerami Grant. He said to the media, I believe Rod Beard of the Detroit News reported this, that he said, this is Grant said, he talked to Weaver and was told well before the deadline that he'd remain in Detroit. The quote being, I'm a Piston, it's what I want to do. So it really sounds like Weaver kind of saw which way the winds were blowing when it came to any kind of a trade offer for Jerami Grant, that he wasn't going to get that blowaway offer and was kind of he knew this was going to go down. He wasn't going to get that offer. So apparently, at least from going by this quote, Troy Weaver knew he wasn't going to get a blowaway offer and Grant wasn't going to go anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, what people say and what they do is not always aligned, So I think there had to be at least a possibility that he could have been traded.
Yeah.
If somebody makes the offer, you can't. If Brad Stevens had made a similar offer to Detroit, it would have been difficult to say no.
Right.
But if they're talking and they're on the same page, then just move forward. You don't.
Yeah.
They don't have to make a deal. But, these days, those late first rounders do have some value. Picks in the 20s and the early second rounders, those picks have value. You can get guys there. But we already got a guy. We got Jerami Grant. So.
Yep.
You mentioned that he didn't look very good coming back, and you're right. But he did hit the game-winning shot in Boston. I don't know if you saw that game just before the All-Star break, and it was a really pretty move. And he swished it. It was just really a big-time shot in a big-time situation, as big-time as you can get when you've only won 13 games. But it ended a big losing streak for the Pistons, ended a big winning streak for the Celtics. Those kind of games, Siddy, do those mean anything to you, or is it just a night in the NBA where an underdog wins and it's going to happen, or is that something that means something going forward to these guys?
I think it was a huge win. It was an awesome win. Of course, I watched it. Going into the All-Star break, they're playing poorly. They had like a nice little stretch where they're competing most nights.
Right.
And then they went on an 8-gamer, getting the doors blown off a few times. It was looking kind of ugly.
Right.
So to come in, Boston, their previous game had a 50-point lead.
Yeah.
Philly on the road, 5-0.
Yeah.
The hottest team in basketball, and then to go home and lose to the team with the worst win-loss record in the league. Yeah, that's awesome. That was a great win. And by the way, you mentioned Jerami Grant's basket, but I thought the highlight of that game was a couple of minutes earlier. Pistons were down 6, 2:20 left. Seemed like the game was getting away from them, and they had the ball with 3 seconds on the shot clock, and they had to inbounds. And Saddiq Bey posted up his defender at the 3-point line, received a short little pass, did one of those. He bumped his shoulder into the chest of the defender, like big men do in the paint,
right.
All in one motion, opened up space, and drained a 3-pointer. to bring the lead down to 3. I was watching the Boston broadcast at that time, and even though the announcers were just stunned. It was such an NBA move, and it really highlighted, they got a special guy in Siddiq.
Mm-hmm. And he's really come on too, by the way. After a slower than molasses start, and there were some whispers of, last year was a fluke, and this kid is not what we think he is, and he's been, I think, playing very good basketball. Though I'd say the last maybe 6-7 weeks. What do you think?
Totally agree. He's been awesome. And the thing you got to remember about Siddiq, I do agree. You nailed it. First quarter of the season, first 25 games, he struggled in the scoring department. Last 25, he's been rock solid. But the thing to remember about Siddiq, he's so big and strong that he always puts something on the table, even when he's not shooting the ball well. And he's learning how to get to the hoop. He's learning how to, he's trying to learn how to finish his drives. He's going to be an all-star. He's going to appear in some all-star games, I think.
Great. All right. Well, Siddy Hall, thanks for being here and kind of breaking down the Bagley trade and talking about Grant and other things, Pistons, and we'll, as usual, we'll bring it back on as we feel like we need to bring it back on, and I know you'll do it, and we appreciate it.
All right. Well, thanks for having me. Take care.
Thank you, my friend. Take care.
And once again, a thank you to Siddy for joining us. It's always interesting to get his take on things because obviously he's very much more analytically oriented, so he goes in much deeper than just your basic counting stats. Because if you look at the counting stats, Bagley's numbers aren't awful. At least we look like points and rebounds and stuff. But when it comes to how he's using the offense and his defensive metrics and things like that, he's a huge question mark. So it was interesting to get his analytical take on a guy that Weaver has reportedly liked for a very long time.
Yeah, and sometimes when you have your sights set on a guy, it almost doesn't matter what he's done before you bring him in. That's just a guy that you wanted to have, and we talked a little bit, of course, in the interview about the Dwayne Casey factor and how that might help Bagley and maybe reach his full potential. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, good stuff by Siddy as usual. So let's get into
let's stick with the NBA real quick, since they just had the All-Star game, and specifically the hot topic lately, Greg, has been All-Star Saturday night. I don't know if you watched any of it. I watched very little of it, basically because it's kind of a convoluted mess. And I did watch a little bit of the dunk contest. I watched the first couple of dunks, and it was so bad. I changed the channel. There was they had guys taking 6-7 attempts trying to make a dunk, and it was more about someone put on a pair of Timberlands to dunk in because they're out of dunks to do apparently. And I did have to laugh on Monday. Stephen A. Smith, every once in a while, he makes a good point, and he called the NBA dunk contest a national atrocity. I had to laugh when I saw the quote because honestly, it was that bad. It was not very entertaining. But then again, this kind of goes into: are there any All-Star events that are fun to watch or entertaining anymore? It's like the Pro Bowl is a farce. The MLB's All-Star game really lost all of its cachet when the two leagues started playing each other in the regular season, and the NBA All-Star game, it was fun. It was, Steph Curry hung up over 50 points in the All-Star game, but there's no defense being played, and he was taking shots from half court, and even the stuff like the home run derby and the NHL just had their All-Star game as well, and they've changed the format so many times. I don't even know how it works anymore. So, and the same thing with NBA All-Star Saturday night. About the only thing that has stayed the same is the three-point contest, and people are saying, well, maybe that should be the finale now, but whatever. So at this point, Greg, have All-Star games really even have they passed their time of relevancy? Because it seems like the only reason they have them anymore is it's more content for television, and that's the only reason these things are still being played. I've always been of the opinion that, like for the NFL Pro Bowl, name the teams, but don't even bother playing the game, because the game is literally touch football at this point. So, but calling the dunk contest a national atrocity, I think that's the first time I agree to Stephen A. Smith in quite some time.
Well, Stephen A. never is one for.
He's a bit for hyperbole. I was going
to say just a little bit. But that's part of his shtick, and that's fine. But
it was that bad. It was awful. It really was.
Hey, they've been doing this thing now for I know. Well,
if you want to go back to the 70s in the ABA, that's how long they've been doing
it. ABA, really is the ones that started. But in the NBA, it's been about 40 years or something like that.
Yeah, and that's the problem. There's no stars. All the guys that were playing, I had very little idea who were taking part.
I don't know what you can do anymore with it. All these dunks kind of look alike to me. I mean, but I was thinking about this when I saw that on the show notes. I said, well, a lot of times getting away from trying to just have a game, the game as it's normally played, have a hockey game. I remember the NHL All-Star game, I think one year the score was like 13-11 or something. Absolutely no defense. But the NBA All-Star game, of course, notorious for scores like 146-142.
I think this year's game was in the 160s. So,
I guess that's what the fans want or whatever. And you can never, the idea of just let's play a game that happens to be filled with All-Stars. Maybe it's time to try to look at maybe just skills competitions or something. But then even then, that kind of starts to run dry after a while. It's like, how many times can you watch guys skate really fast on a hockey rink? How many times can you watch power hitters hit home runs off batting practice? Essentially batting practice pitching. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what the answer is. I think the Major League Baseball All-Star game, if you just make it a regular game, is still probably the closest thing to being something
to an actual competition.
Right. The other, I don't know. I mean, I guess you have to have some sort of. I know the leagues are doing this where they bring the young kids in. They have a young stars thing where you get to see the young players, the future stars of tomorrow.
Yeah, the Rising Stars game they call it the NBA, which actually had 3 Pistons in it, which was okay, but.
I don't know what else. I don't know what the solution is.
Honestly, that was more entertaining than the All-Star game to me, anyway, because these are guys I think were thrilled to be there compared to the All-Star game, where a lot of those guys have done this year after year after year, and it's really old hat to them. I think a lot of these. Ask LeBron James; he'd probably rather have the weekend off than show up at an All-Star game. So I understand why athletes probably feel that way, But this all it comes down to television. Television needs and wants live content. They are willing to pay for it, and as long as people keep watching. And it absolutely shocks me that, for example, the Pro Bowl continues to rule in the ratings despite being such a god-awful game. It means we're going to keep getting these farcical all-star competitions that really are, for the most part, a facsimile of the real thing.
Yeah, there's not really, and you're right about by the way, the baseball with all the different formats, and if you win, remember they did the thing with whatever league wins gets to host gets the home field advantage,
which was ridiculous. Yes.
The Pro Bowl has long been a joke. That's long been. I mean, all that was for a long time was just a way to send players, really essentially
a paid vacation,
with a trip to Hawaii.
Right.
But then they stopped playing the game in Hawaii.
Yeah.
Right? So that went up a little bit.
Right.
But I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't know what the answer is. I guess they got to do something. You can't just heaven forbid they just take a break and just call it the break.
Right.
Nobody does anything.
Right.
But you've got to have. There's got to be some. There's got to be some sort of recognition. There's got to be some sort of it's some stature to being named an all-star, certainly, even if you don't even play a game, just to be named to a team.
Yeah, I'd be fine with that. Name the teams and let everybody go home and rest for 5 days and then hit the ground running.
The NHL is just the goofy thing where different coaches coach these. It's just getting just weird.
Yeah, I couldn't even. I like the NHL All-Star game had some sort. They had 4 teams and. They sort of round robin thing that was, and then they had a final, and it was and they seem to change it every couple years. I have no idea who was supposed to be playing for what, and where, how, why, whatever. And it was,
right.
It's, I know we're just screaming into the wind and we're tilting at windmills here.
Yeah.
But the only thing that will change is if people stop watching, and unfortunately, people still watch even crappy product, and for the most part, All-Star games are crappy product. But if people are going to watch, the league are still going to put it out there, and the networks are going to broadcast it. So I guess if we want it to go away, we stop watching, and unfortunately, that's probably not going to happen. So,
right.
But yeah, it was a national atrocity. I will go with that. So anyway, with that, let's stay with basketball, Greg. Now, okay, let's get to the meat of the podcast. Let's start working our way to gnawing on the bone, so to speak. And, Juwan Howard probably was ready to gnaw on a lot of things when he got so angry at the Wisconsin game that, he put on a display that has made the school pretty much a national laughingstock the last couple of days. Juwan Howard was suspended yesterday for the remainder of the regular season, it's 5 games, for striking a Wisconsin assistant coach during a post-game handshake line argument that turned into a row, a fight, a squabble, a mob scene, whatever the hell you want to call it. At the end of a nationally televised CBS game, it was a 77-63 blowout loss in Madison. A visibly agitated, pissed-off Howard was arguing with Wisconsin coach Greg Gard over Gard calling a late-game TO, which kind of was caused by Howard having the Wolverines play a full-court press with 15 seconds left in the game, and it was well over. While trying to explain to Howard why he called a timeout or whatever, trying to get a word in, apparently Gard touched Howard. That set Howard off, who became beyond incensed. Wisconsin has assistant coach Joe Krabenhoff got involved. He seemed to be a shit stirrer. Howard got so mad he hit him. It wasn't a punch, but he swung and it looked like an open-handed slap and bopped Krabenhoff on the head, which started a pushing and shoving match between the teams. Players threw some punches. It was really, for lack of a better word, a complete shit show, and it was all essentially caused by Juwan Howard. Post game, Howard. This is where things got even worse. Howard was completely unapologetic. Didn't apologize. Didn't say anything about being in the wrong. But almost immediately after the game, Greg, Michigan's AD Ward Manuel and the school president swiftly issued apologies to University of Wisconsin, to their athletic department, to their president, and so on. Monday, obviously, Howard was suspended. He was also fined $40,000 and will not be allowed to any team activities until the suspension is over. And apparently, they're going to talk about things, or they're going to go to 5 games and then assess if he should come back. But he'll be back for the tournament, the way it looks like. Probably the Big Ten tournament, which is also, this is horrible for Michigan because they're a bubble team right now, playing for their tournament lives. Now they're not going to have their head coach during probably their most important stretch of the season. So associate head coach Phil Martelli will take over, which actually is, you can do a lot worse. Martelli he coached St. Joe's for decades and took them deep in a tournament a few times. So he is a solid coach, so it should be okay there. But still, you're missing Juwan Howard. 2 Michigan players who threw punches will serve 1 game suspension. Gard was fined $10,000. A Wisconsin player was suspended for 1 game. And essentially, Michigan has become a punchline over the past 2 days. It was ugly all the way around, a horrible look for the university. And I guess what it comes down to, there is I think a significant portion of people who think Howard should have been fired. And that was my first thought, Greg, because, as someone in a previous life who hired and fired people and ran businesses, if someone who worked for me swung, even if it was if they were wholly in the right, and still if they they threw a punch at somebody, they are fired on the spot. You don't do that. Say you go into work, Greg, and you get an argument with a coworker, and you throw a swing, you're out on your ass. Yet on sports, this is when it comes to sports, I don't know if you want to call it a double standard or they're on a different plane or whatever, but this is like a second strike for Howard, because last year he screamed, "I'm going to kill you," at the Maryland's head coach during the Big Ten tournament after a game. So I don't know. And the other thing to keep in mind, we're talking about a 49, 50-year-old man who is doing these things. And I guess that was my first thought, is that if I'm Ward Manuel, obviously, if I'm a manager, if I'm a boss, if I'm running things, and my top employee loses complete control of himself, takes a swing at somebody on national TV, no less, how is that not a fireable offense? I guess that's what it comes down to. I mean, I'm not advocating for Howard to lose his job, because overall he's done a pretty darn good job with Michigan, even though they're having a down year this year. Hitting, punching, slapping somebody, that's a fireable offense, except in sports, which I still have trouble wrapping my head around. But this whole thing has been a complete shit show from the beginning, and they're going to be talking. And just wait till he comes back in 5 games, and it's going to come all up again. It's been, if I'm Ward Manuel, I am beyond pissed off. And God forbid, Mary Sue Coleman, the president of Michigan, you got to wonder how she feels about all this.
Well, Michigan's going through, you mentioned Coleman, Michigan's going through already something.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Their president resigned over a sex scandal.
Yeah, that's not helping. But that's another story entirely. But so in other words, Al, the suspension doesn't go through any sort of postseason?
No, it's just the regular season. They got 5 games left in the regular season. Okay, well, he's going to be supposedly allowed to coach in the Big Ten tournament.
That's wrong. Yeah. That's right away is wrong.
At the I was thinking entire season myself.
Yeah, he should be suspended for the rest of the season, including the tournament. Any sort of tournaments they're playing in, he should not be coaching. Period. Until they can reevaluate in the summer. This is an athletic director's nightmare. Yes. I can tell you, when you're put in a situation where you've got a high-profile school like Michigan, a high-profile program, which doesn't matter who the coach is, because if you're a high-profile program, that means the coach is high-profile, and something like this happens, which would never. You mentioned the Maryland thing last year, but I'm sure Ward Manuel's not. He's sitting at home not thinking anything that his coach is going to take a swing at somebody. Right. So now you got this unexpected scenario. Which, like you said, makes Michigan look just awful. And it just, as an athletic director, it just is a nightmare, because now you feel like, what do I do here? Any decision I make is going to be the wrong one. Of course, you've got to just block out the noise. You just got to boil this down to, if you're Manuel, what is the best thing for the university? Right. Forget all the social media, forget the apologists for Howard, forget the people who want to have him, kicked out immediately. Just what is the best thing for the program? That's what it has to boil down. That's what any decision, Al, of this magnitude has to boil down to, is what is best for Michigan. Right. And that's the only thing that can really drive, because if you do that, if you base your decision on that, then you can defend it based on that. If you're going to stick to some sort of principle and say, okay, I'm going to make the decision here that is the best, not for Juwan Howard, not for Ward Manuel, not for Mary Sue Coleman, but for the Michigan basketball program and by extension the university. Right. That's the decision that if you stick by those standards, then you can block everything else out, and you can then confidently defend that decision as based on such. So now what does that mean? Okay, well, if you do that, if you say I'm going to do what's best for the university and best for the program, I don't think you're going to get a whole lot of pushback if you do let the guy go. Right. I really don't think you're going to get a lot. You're going to get, of course, you're going to get some people that are going to say, wokeness and politically correct, and people are snowflakes and stuff like that. Well, okay, fine. All I know is that for years we used to. And here's the other thing that's tricky though about this is the white privilege aspect of this. Bobby Knight for years, was a menace to officials and to administrators and to his own players and on and on and the rule book in general. He was a bully, pure and simple. Yeah, he got away with it for decades at Indiana before they finally said enough is enough. Well, yeah, if he had to choke a player and have it be caught on film, finally. Now, Bobby Knight is, as we know, white, And now here's Juwan Howard, who is not.
Yeah.
And now, does that play into it? I don't know. All I know is that it black or white. What happened on Sunday in Wisconsin just was ridiculous. And I don't care what guard said. I don't care what that assistant coach who was flapping his gums said. It doesn't matter. You're a leader of men. Somebody put it real well that I saw. They said, look, if you can't control your own self,
mm-hmm.
and you can't keep your own self under control, how do you expect your players to
and we saw that he ended up getting 2 of his players suspended.
So
following their coach's lead.
So I can't. First of all, it should be longer than 5 games. He should not be allowed to coach in the postseason. I can't believe they're allowing him to coach. Frankly, I can't believe they're allowing him to coach in the postseason. I'm not going to lose sleep if he's not fired. It's not that kind of thing.
Right.
But I think you can make a case if you're Ward Manuel to fire him.
Yeah.
First of all, he's not. He hasn't been with the university for a million years. I mean, he's not. Some of these guys who have been with been around for a long time. You kind of give him a little bit of slack. Howard's in his third year as coach.
Yeah.
Not like he's been around forever. It's not like they've won banners ever since he's been there. So I think you could get away with, it was an unfortunate thing, but we can't tolerate that in Michigan, especially with everything else now that's going on with in this state, not just in Michigan, but in the whole state of Michigan with scandals about sexual assaults and sexual harassment, and the president of Michigan had to resign in shame, and now you've got.
Hey, let's not forget the Jim Harbaugh "Please Hire Me" NFL tour.
Oh, I mean, like I say, it's a nightmare for Manuel, but I think if you just base your decision on what's best for the program, do you want this guy? I mean, this is, like you said before, this is not the first time.
Yeah.
You cited that Maryland example. I mean, this guy's at the very least, if they're going to bring him back next year, then he's got to undergo some sort of anger management, some sort of therapy or something.
Yeah.
They've got to address this, because I can guarantee you this is going to happen. Something like this is going to happen again. Yep. Something like it. I'm not sure what it is, but something like it is going to happen again if they don't reel this guy in.
Yeah, and you make a good point about needing therapy or anger management classes or something, because you can't just say, "Oh, I'm going to change," and then what are you going to do? Sit home and think about it for 3 weeks? That's essentially what the suspension is.
Here's the other thing too. Here's the other thing that bothered me about it, and it's always to me, it's a lot of what goes into these decisions is how did the individual respond after it happened. And I did not see a lot of contrition on the part of Howard.
There was none.
In the post-game press conference. If nothing else, he doubled down a little bit on what he did. He certainly didn't apologize for it.
Right.
And he certainly didn't seem to have any sort of even recognition that it was wrong, or any sort of self-reflection that maybe I lost my cool a little bit, and it was unfortunate, and I'm sorry it happened. There was none of that.
Yeah.
And so that's another thing that makes me a little bit leery about this too, is that he didn't seem to show any sort of recognition that he had done something wrong at all. And when you start going down that path, and the person that's doing this stuff, he doesn't even think he did anything wrong. Now, he may reflect on it a little bit and just may sink in a little bit, and then he might look at the video and then realize what he's done. And I understand that press conference that I'm talking about was probably less than half hour after this whole thing happened.
Right.
But you would think that because it was less than a half hour after it happened, that he would be kind of, I just lost control. I don't know what it all happened so fast. He was like very calm and like, the guy put his hands on me, and that's I don't know. I mean, that's
the thing. What happened to Michigan's PR or media guy going to Howard and saying this is an awful look? Those guys probably, because if you looked online right after this, Howard was absolutely getting shredded online, and people, when we're not even talking fans, we're talking college basketball media members absolutely shredding Howard for his actions. And you would have thought there would have been someone with the University of Michigan staff saying, you need to be contrite here. You need, or don't even give a presser. You know, if you're not going to be apologetic and contrite over your actions, don't even talk to the media. So we sit down and make out a plan as to how we're going to handle this because you know, and the apology that was issued, he didn't give that in person. That was obviously written by Michigan's, you know, PR staff. Howard might have said, yeah, make it sound like I'm apologetic, and they made it sound that way. But it's and your point about guys like Bobby Knight, you know, one, it's not 1985 anymore. I mean, hell, you know, when he was at the height of his reign of terror at the University of Indiana, but Indiana or whatever. It's and it was. You know, you can't. Just because things flew 30 years ago doesn't mean they should fly today. People should realize that. So using that argument that coaches did that years ago and didn't get fired or anything. Well, it's not years ago anymore. It's a completely different environment now. So firing Howard was not a hill I would have died on, but I would have completely understood it if that's what had happened. Because you just can't do that, and you know it's a professional situation, you know, and we've both been in situations where I'm sure we've been irrationally angry at a coworker or a customer, or you know, or something that happened at work. Yet, you know, you can't lash out like that because you will lose your job, you know, and. I guess that's the last take, the final real take I have of this is that I guess for one thing we've learned about sports, Greg, is that you can do some pretty vile shit and keep your job, while when you're outside of life's toy store, you do something that's a fraction as bad, and you're looking for a job the next day. You know, and I guess it's just the double standard. But then again, we've seen double standards in sports compared to real life for years, and I just find it kind of frustrating. I mean, like I said, I'm not advocating that Howard should have been fired. But it wouldn't have bothered me if he did. I would have completely understood it. I just think what bothers me more is the double standard that now he's essentially on his third strike. You know, because you know. And he's had some other outbursts, but he's had two really nasty headline-making outbursts in 2 years. So, you know, and not even 2 years, in less than essentially 1 calendar year, he's had outbursts like this. So, I guess that's what bothers me in the end is the double standard that coaches and players can pull shit like this and keep their highly paid jobs, yet Joe Blow yells at a customer or you know gets upset or gets into an argument with his coworker and they're fired. And I guess that's the difference between having a multi-million-dollar contract and being an at-will employee. But Michigan could have easily fired Harbaugh for cause. They wouldn't have had to pay him, I'm sure. But you know they're going to try and ride out the controversy. Hopefully this will pass. And Ward Manuel's got to be praying to the basketball gods that Juwan Howard has learned his lesson, because if this happens, anything remotely happens like this again, he's got to fire him. You know, this has got to be zero tolerance.
And I would think that message has already been delivered to Howard.
You would hope.
By Michigan, by Michigan administration and Manuel is that this look, you know, we're going to give you one more shot at this, but you know. Woody Hayes, of course, who was at Ohio State for a million years, finally got fired. Because he punched that Clemson player,
a lineman for Clemson.
Right. Yeah. In a bowl game in front of national TV, in front of all the cameras, everybody to see, which was unfortunate as well for Hayes, because back then not every game was on television, and had it happen on a Saturday afternoon in Iowa when the cameras weren't even on, maybe that wouldn't have been. But it was in a nationally televised bowl game, and it was that was the last straw for Hayes. When really, when you think about it, Hayes hadn't really done anything wrong other than he was. You're right. And who knows what happened in practices? But he had never, other than like tearing up yard markers. Yeah, right. He never hit a player. Right. Yeah. So, but you know, the university had no choice. You know, they decided, this is Woody Hayes, an icon. I mean, can you imagine it'd be like Michigan firing Bo? for something that if Bo had done something like that. I mean, these are guys, Bear Bryant at Alabama. I mean, Woody Hayes was an icon, and he got let go. That's what I'm saying. Juwan Howard is not an icon. I mean, he's not. Yeah, he's a Michigan guy, and he had some success last year. That's true. You mentioned this year they're having a down year, but what kind of year they're having should not enter into this whatsoever. No. It has nothing to do with win-loss record. I don't care if he was undefeated or if he was winless. Right. It has nothing to do with what happened here. What I'm saying is, it's not like this guy has been a mainstay at Michigan has been the coach for the Wolverines for 15, 20 years. He's not Tom Izzo. And so they're giving him this extra rope now, which we hope, like you said a few minutes ago, he doesn't use to hang himself because, like you said, he is on strike three essentially, and the Maryland thing was of course not physical, but it was a very
and that's the other thing. If that had been handled better a year ago, maybe this doesn't happen because essentially they let him apologize and he wasn't even suspended. For essentially threatening the life of the other team's coach. Yeah, right. When you think about it, that's another thing. Say, you're at work and Greg, you yell at somebody, "I'm going to kill you," and not in a joking way.
Right.
You're being marched to HR right then and there, and probably shit canned. So Howard's outbursts have been handled the wrong way, since the first time it happened. So now I guess this is just accumulation of it not being handled correctly, and now Michigan's kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place right now, and they have to hope that Howard learns his lessons. But I'm with you; he has to show more than just words, written words at this point. He hasn't even shown up; he hasn't even spoken to anybody since this happened. So, it's one thing to say, "Oh yes, I'm going to learn from this," but how are you going to learn from this? As you said, therapy, anger management classes. Talking to people, doing something, because he just can't sit at home and hope this washes over. He has to be a little bit more proactive and show people that he's trying to learn and improve from essentially making a complete ass of himself on national television.
Well, again, it's not just him. It's the whole university. That's what I'm saying. And this is,
it's just another sign that big time college sports is broken, and for that matter, universities as a whole are hypocritical all the way down. Because this all involves money, pure and simple. So
well, it's so funny, Al, because the very same people who are so touchy. About Michigan's reputation and are so, just have this inferiority complex about Michigan and are so protective of the reputation, the Michigan man and the whole 9 yards, and just are the same ones who are defending Howard despite the fact that this tarnishes the university's reputation more than a lot of other things that they think is tarnishing the reputation of the university. And this is really, truly tarnishing the reputation of the university. Right. What Manuel's trying to do, he's trying to have his cake and eat it too. And I know that that's the thing that when you can get sucked into when you're put in a position that he's been put into, Manuel's been put into, you tend to go to that, how can I have my cake and eat it too? How can I provide some sort of discipline here, but yet not cut ties with a guy who I think might be a rising star and could be the coach of Michigan for the next 10, 15 years?
Right.
How do I walk that fine line? Well, how do you do it? By a suspension, of course. But in this case, the suspension doesn't go far enough. I can't believe that he's not suspended for any March games. I find that just unbelievably. You may as well not suspend him at all. Then you may as well just say, well, you may as well just let him coach, because if you're going to let him coach in the postseason, which is arguably the most important games of the year,
right?
What is that? I don't get that either. I don't care if they've got Buster Brown as the assistant coach. Now, they happen to have Martelli, who's vested and he's got lots of experience. I don't care who the assistant is. You can't let this guy coach until we get it all. We settle down. We talk about it in the summertime. We get him some sort of help, something that, I don't mean psychological help, but, help with his temper or help with his, you just can't just say, well, we'll see in a couple of weeks, which is essentially what they're doing. There's 13 days left in the season, 5 games, of course, we've talked about it. Right. He's going to come back and coach in the postseason like nothing ever happened. I don't get it. I don't.
It's just I don't get big time sports anymore. It's the money has gotten so crazy that we get the decisions made like this, and I guess that leads us, Greg. Let's talk about another shit show, the Olympics. It's a quick take on the Olympics because they pretty much dominated television for the past 2 weeks, even though they were all over our television and our streaming services. The Beijing Winter Games were a cluster of bad TV ratings, drug controversies, and it was just bad vibes all around because all reports are that the Beijing Olympics saw the smallest audience of all time for NBC. The games averaged reported 11.4 million viewers across all platforms during prime time. And we have to remember that there was a 13-hour time difference between the East Coast, Eastern daylight time, and the time in Beijing. So, but regardless of that, it's between COVID, Greg, and seeing these athletes compete in front of essentially empty stadiums. Very few people in the stands. The fact that there was a massive drug controversy in the women's figure skating where a 15-year-old kid who obviously is being led astray by her coaches and the Russian athletic, whoever runs the Russian athletics. She tested positive for numerous, I believe, a handful of different performance-enhancing drugs, and her excuse was, I mixed it up with my grandfather's medicine. Yeah, it happened to me all the time when I was 15 years old. But they went to a tribunal of some sort, and they said, well, we can't make a decision in time, so we're going to allow her to compete. And then we got to see a 15-year-old kid absolutely melt down on worldwide television. And it was heartbreaking to see. It was, this is literally a child in front of a worldwide audience, absolutely the pressure finally getting to her. She had an awful free skate where she fell a few times and botched a few moves, and then she just broke down in tears, and her coaches were yelling at her, saying she quit. At least that's what that's how they were translating it. It was absolutely horrific to watch. It makes you wonder, why are they letting kids this young even compete at this level? It was just horrific to watch. And then you also there was a diplomatic boycott of the games, or many of the Western countries and some of the Far East did not send any type of diplomatic staff to the games due to China's obvious history of human rights violations and other things they've done against Muslim ethnic minorities, and we just know how some of the atrocities China has committed over the past few years, but they have a shit ton of money, and the IOC sees nothing but dollar signs when it comes to the Olympics. So, and let's not even forget that what was hoped to be one of the highlights of the games, that the hockey tournament, because they were hoping to get the best players in the world to compete against each other. Well, because of COVID, the NHL backed all their players out, so it ended up being a bunch of college and minor league players showing up, and people who played in European leagues, and it turned into a absolutely boring ass tournament. So, if NBC, who's paid billions for the rights, Greg, and I'm sure some of the other worldwide networks, who've paid massive amounts of money to the IOC for the television rights of this, you have to wonder if these networks are starting to think, is it actually worth the time, money, and effort involved when all we are seeing is decreasing returns, athletic competitions that are, if not rigged, are run poorly, and the fact that people are starting to see the Olympics for what they are, that right now it's allowing places like China to do what they call sportswashing, where they try to use sports as a way for good PR. And that's exactly what China did with this. This is why the games have been in China twice in less than 10 years, because they are throwing money hand over fist trying to improve their reputation worldwide with sporting events. The whole Olympic thing, Greg, has become a shit show. And, it's a shame because it used to be so, I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. Remember watching this when I was a kid, and and seeing what it used to be when it was still really true amateurs for the most part, and now it's professional athletes in pretty much every level of the Olympics. Even on the obscure sports, the bobsledders, they're professionals, they're getting paid. But no, I don't know. It's the whole Olympic movement, Greg. At this point, it feels more like a bowel movement than anything else at this point.
Well, the Olympics, as you know, has long been unfortunately intertwined with whatever the political landscape is.
Yes, you're right. Yeah.
At the time, there was
going back to the Berlin Olympics in the 30s.
Right.
Yeah.
There was the 1980. I think the United States boycotted.
They boycotted Russia in 80. Russia did the same in 84.
Yeah,
right.
and there's been, of course, so there's always been that intertwining of the Olympics and
as I say, everything's political, especially the Olympics. Yeah.
Right. And when you're talking about international or global thing with so many different countries, so many different cultures, so many different types of government, so many different types of the way of life and so forth, it's bound to you want to say that it's all about the athletes, it's all about the competition, and it's not. I mean, it isn't. I mean, you like to say that. It sounds good, but it's not. It's not. It never has been. And then, of course, there's been a lot of controversy in the actual games themselves. And, the 72 basketball debacle, of course. And there's been other, other instances where it just hasn't.
Oh, yeah, there was a figure skating judging scandal about, 15 years ago. Yeah.
That's right. You're absolutely, you're right. So, you're not going to, this isn't the Special Olympics, okay? it's not. I mean, you're gonna have this kind of a thing, and yeah, I mean, for most of us who just want to sit there and watch really cool luge or really cool slalom or really cool ski jumping, I mean, I'm all, but there's always going to be this kind of a thing, and there's almost every Olympic, whether it's summer or winter, there is something that bobs to the surface, whether it's a doping thing or a political thing or a judge's thing, or something will come up that kind of overshadows, if not the entire Olympic Games, then certainly a portion of it. It kind of bobs to the surface and kind of rears its ugly head. And, but by the time that the closing ceremonies happen and the medals are given out, for the most part, we're all kind of, okay, that was nice. It was good to see. We'll see in 4 years. But this kind of a thing with this kid you were talking about, this young lady, this
Camelia Vaeva, I believe.
Yeah, I mean, it was too bad. I know that NBC, Johnny Weir and Tara Lipinski, the two commentators, protested her performance, I should say, by staying quiet. They did not at all comment at all during the entire performance, which was their way of protesting. They didn't think that she should be allowed to compete. Of course, initially she was not allowed. The decision was reversed. She was allowed. And I think what does get lost in all this, Al, is it doesn't seem to matter anymore. And I know you can't put a lot of stock into the social media trolls. I get it. But it doesn't seem to matter anymore how old anybody is. It doesn't seem to matter. 15-year-olds are treated like 25-year-olds. There's no sort of decorum. There's no sort of cut her a break because she's a kid. She's 15. Even people who have 15-year-old kids aren't cutting her a break. Or everybody either had a 15-year-old kid or is going to have one. And it doesn't seem to matter how old anybody is anymore. Everybody's treated like an adult. Everybody's treated as if, I saw the word karma thrown around, like she's just this big bad wolf. And I mean, yeah, that was unfortunate, and people forget, I shouldn't say they forget. They just choose to ignore the fact that this is a 15-year-old. You mentioned a couple seconds ago about, should there be some sort of, you hinted at, should the 15-year-old even be competing in I don't know, frankly, I don't know what the age minimum is. I honestly
yeah,
don't remember.
look at the gymnasts in the summer games. So
Well,
they're kids as well.
Right, they're always very young, and but there's a lot of pressure on these kids. Essentially,
I couldn't imagine at 15 years old, when I was 15 years old, being under that kind of pressure.
No,
I got worked up enough just playing in a goddamn high school baseball game. For example,
and you don't know, right? And you don't know what kind of impact this is going to have on people as they get older in life. Will they be able to just live normal lives when all the bright lights get turned off and now they're not in the limelight anymore, and their career, their competitive career is over with, and now they have to kind of assimilate into the real world with a real job and so forth. I don't know what kind of stuff this is going to do to that kid. I mean, that young lady, the 15-year-old. I don't know. Maybe she'll be fine. Maybe.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing I saw. I think the best comment I saw about that is, in 4 years from now, the Russians will bring 3 more teenagers.
Yeah. Who
are almost exactly the same, but or even better. Yeah. Because of the system they have. But it'll be 3 different kids. Once the games are over, they just kind of toss them aside and move on to the next generation.
Right.
Because they probably got some 11 or 12-year-olds. They'll be ready for the next Olympic Games. Oh, it's and you make a good point about Lipinski and Weird as commentators. I find them excellent.
Yeah.
They don't hold back.
They're very good.
They make their feelings. First off, they let their biases be known. But they aren't afraid to criticize. They explain figure skating in a way that laymen can kind of start grasping what they're doing, and also that people will say, "Oh, they're blaming the kid." No, they weren't. I remember one thing they said. I think it was Sarah Lipinski said, "I blame the adults. The adults failed her."
Yes.
That's her exact words. She's not blaming the kid. She's blaming the system and the people around her.
Well, what's nice,
and they deserve all the blame, not the kid.
You know what's nice about, you mentioned Lipinski and Weir kind of being candid and so forth. You know what's nice about, that's the nice thing about being an Olympic announcer, is you're not beholden to a team.
Yes.
You're not a homer. Yeah. I mean, you could be, if you're American, I guess you can root for the American team, but you're not bought and paid for. You're not hired and fired. You're not being employed by the team.
You don't have to be a homer announcer.
Yeah, you're not right. Like you're not. You can be candid.
Yes.
You can be a little bit critical of whether it's the judges. Usually it's the judges or it's the system. It's not so much the athletes. Right. You can do that because you're not beholden to anybody really, and I think that's what kind of makes Olympic announcing a little bit edgier at times, even for something seemingly kind of you wouldn't think it would be that way for something like figure skating, which is a very beautiful, artistic kind of a performance. But I saw the same kind of edginess in, I think it was the half pipe. Mm-hmm. I can't remember who the announcer was, and he went on and on about. He was vehemently disagreeing with.
Oh yeah, I know the one you were talking about. Yeah, he thought the guy deserved a far better score.
Oh, he was really.
He was incredulous.
Yes,
and this wasn't even an American he was talking about. This was something from another country.
He was all. I thought he was going to just up and leave. He was so upset.
Yeah.
But again, you can do that because you're not. Nobody's. The network is paying your salary. The network has no skin in the game. They don't really care who wins or loses per se. I mean, really. So, I mean, you can go out there and say these kinds of things, and that's what's kind of refreshing about Olympic announcing is you kind of think it wouldn't be that way, but it is. It can be very edgy. I remember Dick Budden, the great Dick Budden, who was the figure skating analyst for years.
Yeah.
Tony Traber with tennis, they didn't care.
Yeah.
They would come out and say what was on their mind. Mm-hmm. Why? Because again, they weren't beholden to anyone. Yeah. I mean, they were just calling it like they saw it, mm-hmm. and it made for some really interesting, edgy commentary.
Yeah, exactly. It's also interesting to see that the NBC had storylines all plotted out, and then those storylines get immediately blown up.
Right.
Like Michaela Schifrin, specifically, the American skier, who was supposed to get several medals. She was favored in a couple of events, and she ended up participating in 6 events and didn't medal in any of them. Mm-hmm. so it's, NBC were prepared to make her a huge star, and instead they had to cover her. I don't want to call it implosion, but more like because she has won Olympic medals in the past. It just wasn't her week or 2 weeks. Sometimes shit happens with athletes sometimes, but it was just interesting to see how NBC had to change their coverage because certain athletes didn't live up to the pre-Olympics hype. That says a lot about how NBC covers it. They don't cover sports per se. They cover storylines and moments that they can push rather than the actual sporting event. Because I'd be laying in bed late at night. That's when I would. Because I'd be able to watch on Peacock, NBC streaming service. They would have the entire event like a half pipe, for example. They would show the thing from first guy to last guy at all the runs, and it would be like 2 or 3 hours. And it wasn't edited, it wasn't chopped up. There was no storylines. The only storylines were how it was following the scores and seeing how they were doing. It was a much and the feed they were using, it looked like the world feed. It wasn't the NBC feed per se for a lot of these. So it made for, I enjoyed it, when I'd be laying in bed late at night looking for something to fall asleep watching. But then again, we're stick and ball sports fans, Greg, and I think we relate more to not moments and storylines, and I think we get into the actual athletic event more than emotional storylines and what the ABC used to call up close and personal stuff, as they used to say. And that still seems to be the issue with the American networks, is that they are more concerned with the up close and personal type broadcast at the Olympics rather than the Olympics as a sporting event, which is what I would prefer. I'm sure you prefer as well. So, yeah. But it was. At least we'll have to talk about it for another 2 years. Yeah. All right. Well, a couple more topics before we start wrapping things up. I guess we can touch on the MLB Lockout real quick. It continues. They are, I guess, this week, Greg, they're going to spend the entire week meeting. They met yesterday. They met today. I just got an alert on my phone via ESPN that not much has changed with today's meetings. I guess the biggest news over the past week or so, though, is that the owners essentially set a drop-dead date for not missing regular season games. First pitch is supposed to happen March 31st. MLB owners want at least 4 weeks of spring training, so they have informed the Players Association last Thursday that the regular season will not start on time if a deal is not agreed upon by Monday, February 28th. So we're essentially 5 days away from that, 6 days away from that now. So at least they're talking, Greg. Yeah. But that's about all you can really say right now, because I really don't think they are that close to an agreement right now, and understandably so when it comes to the players, because the owners are barely countering any offers. Their offers are minuscule. They're moving very, very, very slowly. You would say, okay, this just beat in the middle, and then we can start spring training, and we'll start regular season on time. But the owners look to be completely unwilling to do that. And I guess, as we mentioned a couple weeks ago, they are so hoping the players to break, but so far the players are showing no sign of falling out of step about their demands. And I say more power to them. And again, this really seems kind of this deadline they gave. Do you really think they need 4 weeks of spring training, considering these players essentially work out year round? I think that's overstated quite a bit. Well, yeah, and I think the players would agree with you, because they don't want to be in Florida for 6 weeks every year. They start to drag after there's a time, maybe 10 to 12 days before the regular season begins, where especially the veteran guys are just like, I'm ready to get out of here. I'm ready to start playing games that matter. Right. I'm tired of taking the bus and going to Winter Haven and playing a game against the B. It's like they're back in the minor leagues if the bus travel and stuff. There might be some pitchers who might feel like they need a little bit more innings to get their arms stretched out a little bit. But most position players
would tell you that it's not necessary to play. I think they play like 25 or 30 generally, 25 or 30 exhibition games, which I think the players would tell you it's probably 10 games too many. Maybe they could probably cut that in half. Frankly,
yeah.
You're going to, and then because you come from Arizona and Florida, and now you go up to many franchises are located in cold weather climates. Yep. So now you're leaving where it's 80 degrees every day, going up to your hometown to where your team's really located, and it's 40 degrees, and you're all those at bats that you had down in Florida when the temperatures were in the 80s and the sunny out and perfect weather. Now you're up playing in 40 degrees and snow. It's like, well, did I need to be down there and get 60 at bats under perfect conditions, only to come up here and now have to rejigger myself to acclimate to this ridiculously cold weather. So I don't know that you need that much either. I'm with you, and I think that's been talked about for years, that you don't need to have that kind of that extensive of a spring training, and certainly not in terms of how many games are being played. And I don't think it's not like pro football with the exhibition games where it's, well, we need to take a look at certain players in game situations. I don't think that's the same thing with baseball. Yeah. I think a lot of these kids are not going to make when you look at it, Al, there's only a handful at best jobs that are even up for grabs.
Yeah, even on bad teams. Yeah.
Right. I mean, there's maybe 3, 4. I mean, there's just a handful of jobs that are even in question when the teams report to their respective spring training locations, and usually those decisions are made, in the first half of the spring training schedule anyway, and the second half is just kind of getting the pitchers stretched out a little bit, they pull the starters after 2 innings anyway, and they 3 innings, and they put in a bunch of guys with numbers in the 70s to finish the rest of the game. So I just don't think that you need all that either. I'm with you on that one.
Yeah. Probably once again, it just comes down to owners wanting a little extra money in their pockets from ticket sales, concessions, TV, whatever, from spring training. So it's ridiculous. There's no reason for that. But hopefully, Greg, in our next show we'll have a little more. Hopefully, there'll be a settlement of some sort. But I still say no. They could probably go. They could probably go with a 2.5 week spring training. They would probably be pretty well set to go for the most part. Or hell, they could even make the rosters bigger temporarily. There's all kinds of different options they could do to start the season on time. Then again, I think we're both in agreement. The season's too long anyway.
Yeah, right.
So what if the season's 154 or 152 games? Doesn't bother me in the least. We'll still get a whole summer full of baseball.
Right.
So hey, they used to play just 154 games. I'd be fine with that. No big deal. Whatever. I know. Again, we're tilting at windmills again, Greg, because billionaires are going to billionaire, and that's where we're at right now. Yeah. All right, one more. I think we only have one more topic on the docket tonight, because actually it's been a pretty. It would have been even more quiet if Juwan Howard hadn't decided to to play Mike Tyson's Punch Out with Wisconsin.
Right.
But really, before the Juwan Howard incident, or what do they call it now? It's the trouble with the slap, as they're calling it right now. Before the trouble with the slap became a thing, the hot topic around here for all damn football season was Matthew Stafford, with the Rams. And Stafford, Greg, won the Super Bowl as a Rams quarterback. He proved the doubters wrong, so to speak. And to his credit, Stafford did lead the Rams on a late fourth quarter TD drive. He threw a game-winning pass to MVP of the game, Cooper Kupp, with 1:25 left to play. That gave the Rams a 23-20 victory over the Bengals. Stafford was Stafford for long stretches of the game. Now, he had 2 questionable interceptions, but he also threw for 283 yards and 3 touchdowns, and did the late game drive thing, which he became noted for in Detroit. So Stafford is now a Super Bowl winning quarterback, proving a lot of us wrong. I didn't think he was going to be able to pull it off, but he did. More power to him.
Yes.
And with the Rams win, the Lions will end up with the 2nd and 32nd picks in the first round of the 2022 draft. And now, Greg, hopefully as a fan base, we can all please move on with our lives. This national nightmare is, I should say local nightmare is over. But it's, I guess what really started to get me, though, was the amount of fans in the Lions fan base. Well, I guess the worst example were the jerseys that showed up that were being promoted of the Detroit Rams.
Oh, God.
That was just pitiful, if you ask me. Anybody would wear that? I mean, I learned a long time ago not to tell people how to be a fan. But there's just, I'm sitting here right now wearing my Barry Sanders jersey, as I usually do when I talk to you.
Right.
And I couldn't fathom wearing something so ridiculous, because that's exactly what it was. And I guess and people would throw out the example, what about Justin Verlander? People rooted for him to win a World Series, or Max Scherzer for that matter. The difference being, Verlander and Astros winning the World Series didn't affect the Tigers' draft picks or anything the Tigers were doing. In this case, you're rooting for the Lions to have a worse chance at a good player. I just found that silly, but again, we've talked about this in the past. I just think it might be just generational, because there's probably there's people who've been fans of this team of their entire life, but they're only like 25 or 30 years old. The only real quarterback they've ever known is Matthew Stafford. To us, he's just another guy. We've seen these quarterbacks come, seen quarterbacks go, but I don't know. I guess it comes down to maybe I just root for the laundry. When it comes down to it, I don't get wrapped up in being so in love with a ball player that I feel the need to follow him once he leaves the city. I mean, I enjoy them when they play here. And the older I have gotten, the more I've realized there's no real loyalty involved in sports. The loyalty is a one-way street in fandom. The fans are loyal to the franchise. To the franchise, the fan base is a dollar sign. To the players, I think the fan base is more of an annoyance than anything else. So, I don't know. I just found the over-the-top love for Matthew Stafford from a not insignificant portion of the Lions fan base to be annoying, I guess is a good word. And I think some of it was it was the fans' way of showing their unhappiness with the Lions franchise as a whole, saying we're going to shower the guy you traded with all kinds of love just to show you how mad we are at you as Sodas. It's something like that. Maybe it's just there's too much psychology going on with this, but I'm just glad the season is over, and hopefully this will be the end of Matthew Stafford talking Detroit. He's moved on, obviously. He's a Ram now, and the Lions need to do what they need to do to make themselves a better team, and that's going to happen without Matthew Stafford. So I just say adios. Let's all move on with our lives and not talk about it anymore.
Well, this is what happens when the Tigers have not won a World Series since 1984. That's almost 40 years. We all know the Lions' 1957 thing. So now between those two, you've got 65 years with the Lions, 38 years with the Tigers. It's over 100 years worth of frustration.
When is the last playoff win for this area? Don't we have to go back well over a decade at this point?
No. I think the Red Wings won a playoff game in 2016 under Blashill. I think they lost that series in 5 games. That might have been the last playoff win, was 2016 with the Red Wings.
Yeah. Okay, I'm probably thinking the last Pistons playoff win is over a decade.
Yeah, that's.
Yeah, so I think, but then again, so you'd have to, probably 2015 for the Wings, 2014 for the Tigers.
Yeah.
And the Lions have to go back to 1991.
Right. So this is what happens when you've got, no success to speak of certainly in recent years, and now fans live vicariously. I mean, they see this Stafford thing just like the Verlander thing you mentioned with the Astros. And I saw that one. We all saw that one coming a million miles away when he got traded to the Astros. Who was a championship-ready team. We saw that coming, that was going to be, because Verlander was never able to win one with the Tigers despite two shots at it. And so now he's going to go to a team that, everybody seems to forget that Verlander's stats for the Tigers in World Series games, albeit a small sample size, is not very good. It doesn't matter, of course. Fans live vicariously through their former heroes, and so Verlander goes to Houston. Now people are rooting for Houston. Frankly, it kind of happened a little bit with Bob Lanier when Bob got traded to the Bucks. There were a lot more Bucks. I can tell you, a lot more Bucks fans than ever around these parts because they looked at Lanier in the same kind of a way. Guy a very talented player who the team could never put around him the right parts to take advantage of that. He was one of the best big men of his time, and at a time when if you had a big man like that, which was the irony, if you had a big man like a Bob Lanier, you typically were an upper echelon team because the upper echelon teams had a big man like Bob Lanier, except for the Pistons, of course. They had couple moments of where they were good, but mostly
they had for a time 2 Hall of Famers on their roster, Dave Bain and Bob Lanier. Yeah.
So, and our good friend Ray Scott coached him. So he goes to Milwaukee, who again a much better team. He goes to the playoffs. I admit it. I was a teenager. I rooted for Bob Lanier when he played for the Bucks. I was hoping the Bucks they could never get past the Sixers in the playoffs, but I was always rooting for the Bucks to win the whole thing. Why? For Lanier. Yeah. Now, I was that much younger, of course. So now you have Verlander, and you got the Stafford thing. It's born out of frustration. It's born out of if the Lions were a perennial winner, and if the Tigers were winning championships like the Red Wings were winning them for a while, you wouldn't, because you don't see this with the Red Wings fans. They don't root for former Red Wings. Like why? Because
go after to see you. Yeah,
they've experienced success.
Yeah,
I mean they don't feel that. They don't feel like they have to get their. They don't have to live vicariously through ex-Red Wings because they were successful as Red Wings. Or if they weren't successful as Red Wings, the franchise was successful. Okay,
right.
When we look at the Lions and the Tigers and the Pistons, though, it's been so long that this is all they have is to root for players after they leave Detroit, and it's also the fans' way of kind of sticking it to the management. We know it's not. It doesn't do anything, but they think it's their way of I'm going to stick it to the franchise by rooting for this guy after he leaves Detroit, and that's all this is. It's nothing more than frustration, and we couldn't celebrate while they were in Detroit, so let's try to vicariously celebrate, even though you and I both know it's not nearly the same thing. It's not.
No. I remember seeing videos posted online of people jumping up and down for Stafford or crying. I'm like, what? It really felt performative, if you know what I'm saying.
Right.
It was. They were going over the top, and no, I think as you said, more in frustration with the Lions more than a love for a 34-year-old quarterback. I don't know, but it's the whole thing. The whole thing was ridiculous. But I'm just glad, Greg. We won't have to ever talk about Matthew Stafford on this podcast again, unless until it comes up. But. We'd probably have to go out of our way to talk about Stafford at this point. So until the draft pick thing comes up again next year, I guess that probably would be the only reason why. But now it's on the Lions' lap. Stafford did exactly what the Rams needed him to do. They won the Super Bowl because they went all in. Now it's the Lions who have to have a successful rebuild, or we're back in the same damn mediocrity rut for the next 5 years. So we'll see what happens. All right. With that, Greg, I think we can start wrapping things up. It was, for the most part, a fairly quiet week in local sports. You know, the Wings are playing decently, but not much has changed since we last talked. Pistons have been off for essentially a week. I don't even think they play till tomorrow or Thursday, for their All-Star break. So essentially now we're in hurry up and wait mode. We're hurry up and wait for baseball to start. We're hurry up and waiting for the NFL draft. And we're hurrying up and waiting for maybe the Wings to make a run at the playoffs, even though I don't think they're going to do it, and for the Pistons to finish tanking. So there we are. So with that note, let's wrap things up. Who's your jerk of the week?
My jerk of the week, I know it's kind of low-hanging fruit. It's Aaron Rodgers. I'm sick of him. I'm sick of Aaron Rodgers. I'm tired of him. I used to, you and I grew up hating the Vikings because of what they did to the Lions in the 70s. The Lions could never beat the Vikings.
Yep.
And the Vikings would beat the Lions in all these ridiculous ways. Block kicks, block field goals, block punts, whatever. You name it, they beat the Lions. Okay. And to this day, 50 years after all that started, I'm still a big-time Viking hater. They're the only time I had any sort of empathy for the Vikings was when Corey Stringer died. When he passed out and died during training camp, I don't know how many years ago that was, the big lineman, and he died of a heart attack, whatever he died of. That was the only time I felt any empathy for the Vikings franchise.
Right.
Other than that, I gloated when Gary Anderson missed that field goal in '98. The Vikings I despise them. But Aaron Rodgers, and my second most hated team is the Packers. And one of the reasons why is Rodgers. This guy's to me he's just a clown. He's sending out I guess cryptic Instagram posts to his teammates or about his teammates to mention against teammates or something about he's not sure where he's going to play. And of course there was the vaccine debacle last year, and then he said he wanted to host Jeopardy, and I'm tired of him. I'm tired of the whole thing.
I wonder what Packers fans feel about it at this point. They're probably ready to move on as well, you would think. It'd be exhausting with the way it seems like every other day there's something different coming out with him. And that thing today with the Instagram post that was all cryptic. And then after a huge controversy broke out, what does he mean? Is he leaving the team? And then he came out and said, I just had a 12-day cleanse. Okay.
Well, you know what,
bizarre. Bizarre.
When you think about it, we just talked about Matthew Stafford winning, his first Super Bowl.
Yeah.
He matches Aaron Rodgers now, okay?
Yeah, right.
And when you look at it, you mentioned Packers fans. Mm-hmm. What has, aside from good regular season records, which granted the Packers have had very good regular seasons under Aaron Rodgers, no question about it.
Yeah.
How much playoff success have they really had? And they've lost some games at Lambeau, which was supposed to be, you can never go into Lambeau in January and win a playoff game. That's long gone. Teams have gone in there multiple times now, and while as underdogs, by the way, and have won. And I don't know, I don't have Pro Football Reference pulled up right now, but I bet you if I go there and I look at what have the Packers really done since they won that Super Bowl after the 2010 season, in the last 11 years since then, what have they really won other than a lot of regular season? Again, no question, the regular season they own the NFC North. There's no question about that.
Right.
But in the postseason, what have they really done other than lose a lot of games at Lambeau where they were the favorite? And who do you blame for that? I never hear anybody blaming Rodgers for losing all these playoff games at Lambeau, where his team has been at least a touchdown favorite. Mm-hmm. They've lost several. If you go back over the last 6-7 years, they've lost quite a few playoff games at Lambeau. They really have.
Oh yeah. So we know who your jerk of the week. We could actually, instead of naming it the Carlos Monterez Award, maybe we could name it the Aaron Rodgers Award, because he's almost an evergreen at this point. As you said, he's low hanging fruit. He really is.
He is. He really is.
All right. My jerk of the week. I'm sure you're familiar with the golfer Phil Mickelson.
Of course.
Yes. He's made tens of millions of dollars in prize money and endorsements and so on and so forth.
Yep.
Well, there was a book being written with his. It's about. I guess it's an autobiography. And he's being interviewed for it. And an excerpt from the book came out late last week. and it's in regard to the Saudi Arabia. Again, we talked about sports washing earlier of China. That's another trick of Middle East countries like the Saudis. You know, they do it with wrestling, for example. They pay the WWE hundreds of millions of dollars to hold events there to make that country look quote unquote normal. It's all PR. It's propaganda. Well, the Saudis are trying to do the same thing with golf, and they wanted to start a professional golf super league. And Phil Mickelson was all gung-ho on this, and an excerpt from the book that's going to come out, I believe, in the spring, came out about his speaking about the Saudi Arabian government aim to start the Super Golf League, as it's called. It's a huge money involved, and it's supposed to rival the PGA Tour. And this is what Mickelson had to say about Saudi Arabia and the new tour that they want to start. They're scary motherfuckers to get involved with, Mickelson said. We know they killed Washington Post reporter Jamal Khashoggi and have a horrible record on human rights. They execute people over there for being gay. Knowing all of this, why would I even consider their new league? Because this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to reshape how the PGA Tour operates. The Saudi money has given us that leverage. Oh, my God. Essentially, he said, I know the Saudis are murderous despots, but there's money involved. There's money to be made. So today he came out and apologized. And, of course, he used these were supposed to be off the record, but they're for a book. You're being quoted for your own book, yet you're claiming this is supposed to be an off-the-record discussion. Bullshit. So Mickelson did the. I'm sorry if I offended anybody with these comments. And he also said, I'm going to step away from golf and the public eye for a while, which probably means he'll come back for the Masters or something, because the Masters, that's a perfect place for him. But if there was one positive, so of course that makes Mickelson my jerk of the week for being more than happy, even though he's a millionaire probably 100 times over. He was still wanted to do business, go into business with essentially murderers, just because there was money to be made. But at least there was one silver lining with this, in that there were some other golfers who were supposedly going to get involved with this. I believe a couple of relatively big names. Bryson DeChambeau, I think, might have been tied in with it, a couple of others. And everybody were like, nope, I want nothing to do with this. And apparently, the way things are looking now, the Saudi-backed Super Golf League is essentially blown up due to the backlash to Mickelson's comments. So at the very least, there's a silver lining to this. But still, how privileged and clueless can you be to make comments that Mickelson did when it comes to dealing with essentially a murderous government that has made its name on human rights violations? So my jerk of the week is Phil Mickelson for being an entitled elitist asshole. But I couldn't believe it when those comments came out. I'm like, listen to what you said. And you're happy to go into business with murderers because I want to stick it to the PGA. It was hilarious and sad.
What I don't understand about I thought these were off the record. Yeah. What I don't understand about the defense. Yeah. Is that, aren't you essentially saying, because don't they say isn't the saying, Al, that you are who you are when the microphones are turned off and when there's okay.
Yeah, so and also the author who put this out, he said I had nothing on record about this being off the record. Nothing. So, but yeah, you're right. You really nailed it there, though. You really show who you are when you think no one's listening.
So when you're saying to say as your defense, well, I didn't think this was supposed to be off the record. Yeah. You're essentially saying, well, in private, I think that this is what I think. Yeah. This horrible take is what I really think. Yeah. That's what you're saying. Yes. It's a weird kind of an apology because you're indicting yourself. It's a self-indictment to say, well, I said these horrible things because I didn't think they would ever be published. Yeah, yeah.
Essentially, he said 2 cell phones in a row, essentially, here.
I mean, I don't know. It's so, yeah, but good call there.
Yeah, it's for all, Mickelson always come across as the populist guy. The fans seem to get behind him, but because he was essentially for a long time he was the main competition to Tiger Woods.
Yeah,
but then again, you could say, well, there's probably a racial component to that for one thing, and the fact that Mickelson had a reputation of being all or nothing when he was on the golf course. But so he was entertaining to watch, because he'd either win big or blow up, one or the other. But the whole thing is just shows how clueless athletes can be sometimes. And you'd think he would know better, but we see time and time again, Greg, that athletes don't know better, and they keep putting their foot in their mouth, and they keep crippling their careers. And I don't know. All right, let's get the hell out of here before we talk about someone else making an ass of themselves, or I make an ass of myself. So if you could, why don't you get out the thank yous and all the other stuff you usually do at the end of the podcast?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks to Siddy Hall for jumping in and kind of short notice and doing that little breakdown of the Marvin Bagley III trade and other Piston talk that he shared with us. That was really enjoyable. We always like to talk to him about the NBA and the Pistons, so that was fun. Take a peek at my column every Monday at my WordPress Out of Bounds blog, if you would. I also share the links every week on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. If you're on LinkedIn, I'm on there too, by the way. I never talked about that, but I am on LinkedIn, and I do share my columns there as well. Follow me on Twitter at Greg, and follow the Knee Jerks on Twitter at the Knee Jerks. I want to thank my lovely wife Sharon for putting up with this nonsense every 2 weeks, and thank you, Big Al, for making Tuesday night so gosh darn fun.
Yes, and thank you, Greg, for putting up for the few headaches we had doing this. I wouldn't say headaches, but we had some glitches because this is my first podcast after cutting the cord, so to speak, from Charter/Spectrum, as this was done completely wireless. Hopefully, we'll continue to iron out the bugs, and my internet connection will stay stable. But so far, so good. But thank you, Greg, for putting up with the headaches from my end. Of course, shout out to City. Give a shout out to Linda, who is busy saving lives in the ER. As always, give a shout out to Bean, the cutest dog this side of the Mississippi, probably both sides of the Mississippi. Even though I think Greg locked himself in a room so no one would bother him for this show. And of course, if you want to listen to the show, you can find it in all the usual places, any place podcast or aggravated. If you want to look for podcasts, we're essentially, if the podcasts are there, you can find us. So you can just do a search for the Knee Jerks or Eno and Big Al, and you can find us in places like Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Google Play, Amazon Music, Deezer, Radio Public. There's always the kneejerks.net, which will take you right to the homepage. It will take you to the show notes. It will take you to any links to the social media. You can download the MP3 from right there as well. And as always, as they say, like, subscribe, comment, pass it around if you like what you're hearing at the show. Just put it on a good word for us. And as Greg said, we are available on Facebook, Twitter, and so on. So with that, hopefully Greg will have a little more Detroit sports to talk about 2 weeks from now. We were kind of all over the place with this one.
Yeah.
But we still managed to, I hope, keep people entertained for an hour and a half. This is Al Beaton saying good evening, good luck, and aloha.
Ciao, everybody. We'll see you in 2 weeks.